Officer Dan back with another informational how-to video about the GKTech inner tie rods. Right away you'll notice how much longer the inner tie rod is from GKTech than the stock one. Check out the difference in thread we have on the GKTech ones versus stock. That's 50 millimeters or about 2 inches on stock, and 170 millimeters or about 6.5 inches on the GKTech extended. Now, because the extra threaded section goes behind where the stock one would go, there's a greater range of adjustment that you can have when cutting these tie rods to length. That being said, these tie rods can accommodate cut, stock, and extended lower control arm lengths. And the overall lengths come in from about 285 millimeters or about 11 inches on stock to about 375 millimeter or 14.75 inches on GKTech. Now that we've got all the important bits out of the way, let's get down to the installation. The first step is going to be to figure out where you need to cut these to length. Now to figure that out, we're going to be using the GKTech outer tie rod ends, but you can use whatever tie rod ends you have available. Now we need to make sure that the shank is fully seated into the knuckle itself. Otherwise there'll be play during installation as well as when you're using it later on. Snug down the shank using an impact and using a nut on the bottom. Now torque to spec and you're done with this part. You want to start off by making sure that your rack is somewhat centered. Now tighten the GKTech inner tie rod into the steering rack, thread the jamnut on, and adjust till it's straight. Now slip the tie rod end onto the shank. This will show you where to cut to get maximum thread engagement. Mark it with an appropriate marking device. Now remove it from the vehicle and put it into some sort of a vise. Now cut on your mark via your favorite cutting tool and leave the nut on. As you thread the nut off, it'll clean up the threads on its way out. Now go ahead and thread the tie rod end to the tie rod. You want to make sure that on both sides there's as much thread engagement as you can possibly get. Now thread the tie rod all the way back down onto the steering rack. Now slip the tie rod end back over the shank. Now to get the most out of the GKTech inner and outer tie rod combination, you need to make sure that you adjust for bump steer. And the way that you do that is to align the tie rod basically parallel with the lower control arm. Now an easy way to kind of set this up is going to be to align the two ball joints so that they're basically even. Now because the GKTech outer tie rod ends are bump steer adjustable, we're going to use the supplied shims to make those adjustments. So stack the washers until your desired bump steer is achieved, then stack the remaining washers on the bottom and thread the nylock nut on. And then torque to spec. Now adjust the tie rod end to where the wheel is basically straight in the wheel well. Again, stressing getting as much thread on the inside and outside of the tie rod end as possible. Now you just need to snug both sides down. Make sure that it's tight in the rack, and you're done. It's time for a wheel alignment. Once again, this is Officer Dan. I'll catch you on the flip side.